What's up, everybody? Soren Baker here on the Digital Soapbox Network and on Unique Access. Appreciate everybody tuning in today and listening to the Soren Baker Show. We've been blessed to have a lot of great guests coming through from all walks of life, all backgrounds, and a wide range of businesses. And today is no exception. We have a accomplished, I would say, legendary producer that I've had the good fortune of knowing since the late 90s. And now we get to bring him in on the Soren Baker Show, and we're very appreciative. DJ Silk, thank you for coming through, man.
Appreciate that. No problem, Soren.
Yes.
You got it.
So DJ Silk, man, this dude has made a lot of great records over the years and is working on so much stuff now. So we're going to talk a lot about what he's doing now, but also kind of set the stage as to some of the landmark material that this good gentleman has produced. So for those that don't know who you are, Silk, explain where you were born and raised. Let's start with the simple, and then we get into the music.
I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago, in an area they call the Wild Hundreds.
Yep.
And I moved out here at a young age, a few times, like back and forth. I was one of those between parents things back in the days. So.
Yeah, now, I stayed on the south side of Chicago, too, on Lake Meadows. So I was right by the Robert Taylor and the Ida B's. Kind of little triangle there on Lake Meadows, right by the White Castle on 35th and King.
Yep.
So I stayed there for a couple years, and I haven't been back to Chicago in a while, but when I was there, it was crazy. If I went south on King, it was Ida B. And if I went west on 35th, is Robert Taylor. And then you were much further south, but south side was no joke.
Yeah, I was close to Roseland.
Yeah. So what, for those that don't know, like coming up in that era, that environment, and being in Chicago, now that you've lived in Southern California for a long time, what was that environment like? Compare and contrast the two areas.
Well, all right, let me be 100% honest.
Yes, please.
California, at that time, you're talking about early 80s. Totally different. The poverty levels in Chicago, still to this day, are different than what you would call California poverty.
Right.
Not saying the people are any different, you know what I mean? Because poverty is poverty. It's still going through the same stuff. But it's just different. Like, I grew up picking up heroin needles on the front porch before I went to school every day. Seeing the homeless that couldn't make it into, like, not really the halfway houses, but, you know, when it's freezing and they got these places that people could go to get out of the cold.
Right.
Some people didn't make it, so they just froze to death on the corner. We were subjected to seeing that. More or less, you know, gangbanging is at its all-time peak, too, just like California.
Right.
But just natural things. You know what I mean? I felt when I moved to California that everybody out here was spoiled.
Well, I remember when I first moved here, or actually when I'd first be coming to work, and I would see like South Central, or I would go to Inglewood, and I would go to these different places I heard about on these records, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm from Maryland. If you go into Baltimore, D.C., and you're in the projects or you're in the hood, you know you're in the hood.
Yeah.
Out here, I'd be telling people where I was. They're like, you in the 20s? And I was like, is that where that was? Because it just looked like a normal neighborhood to me.
Yeah, like the Nickerson Gardens. I remember the first time I seen the Nickerson Gardens. And I was with a couple of homies who went to go play basketball. And it was like I can't remember what it was, what the name of it was. But it was like a, you know, like not like a church, but you know, you can go open gym.
Right, open gym.
And we're going over there, and he's like, yo, those are Nickerson G's over there. I was like, I'm looking at it, they look like nice condos. Like, I mean, I'm sure the people in there look tough, you know, standing out in the front and everything like that, but I'm like, they look like nice condos to me.
Right.
You know, that it's not like brick. Like you used to see in the brick city poverty level. Like I used to see dudes that, I'm from the West Side, whatever, PJs, but I'm like, you got Jordans on. You know what I'm saying? You have clean gear on. Like, I grew up where it was literally holes in my shoes with duct tape on them. And nobody was laughing because everybody else lived like that. Like, so it was this different culture shock. My father had a little bread in those years to be able to actually come get me. I just got blessed, like that.
Yeah, it's a very dramatically different world, because growing up in Maryland, then I went to college in Cincinnati, then I moved here, then I had a brief detour in Chicago, and then came back to LA where I've been ever since. And it's just amazing the different ways that people live in the different parts of the country, based largely on the weather, of course.
Yeah.
But then you also have just the lifestyle in general and the way the houses are built. Because in Chicago, as with Maryland, you got real projects that are like monumental buildings, as opposed to here, it's not really like that.
Yeah, when I moved out here, I remember saying, dang, these are TV houses. And this is a long time ago, so I know I'm going to sound old, but at the same time, E.T. was out. Okay, and I was a kid. So E.T. came out, I think that was 84 when E.T. came out.
All right.
And then I remember coming to California the next day, because I flew in at night. My father had me flown in. I'm talking about when I came to stay permanently.
Okay.
He flew me in on night, so I didn't get to really see the houses.
What they look like?
And then the next day I said, oh, these are E.T. houses, or what you've seen on Poltergeist. Like, just to see the stucco on the outside of a house, it just seemed like everything was TV. To see trees, to see grass, to see any of that. And then, Chicago is very, very segregated.
Extremely.
So to see different people, different races of people, all where, I could walk down the street and see different nationalities. That was very, very new to me. In Chicago, the only people that we were, like, I didn't know what Mexican people were as a culture when I was that young. I really didn't. I only knew who Puerto Ricans were.
Okay.
We seen white people on TV in downtown.
It's funny you say that, because when I stayed on the South Side, I remember after a few days, I realized I had only seen black people. So then I kind of took a note, and I literally did not see a non-black person for a week. I literally checked my calendar, and I kept track of this. So that was like, it was shocking, because in Maryland, my neighbors were black. We had a very diverse neighborhood. And then Cincinnati, going to school, obviously, is different people. And in LA, it's just everybody in the world comes here. But Chicago, nah.
It's like, I don't know what the number is, but it's got to be 80, 90% black. I mean, all of my teachers were black. Everybody around me was black, outside of Puerto Ricans. And you didn't know if they were, sometimes you couldn't tell if they were Puerto Rican until you went to their house and see their mama speak. Or their sister had good hair. You know what I mean? So it was like that. And, coming up a little different than a lot of kids my age group and my generation moving out here. I did a lot of things at 6 and 7 years old, literally, that most children don't do now.
Like what? What do you mean?
I mean, I was taking city transportation.
Oh, yeah.
At 7, 8 years old.
Now, was that the
L?
City
by myself.
The buses?
L, the subway, and the buses.
Okay.
By myself, though. I wasn't a latchkey kid. My mom didn't trust me in the house, literally. It's totally different. When I moved to California, my father, or I guess they was putting me in school. They made me take that assessment test, how to see where you were. And I wasn't a super smart kid, but I skipped a grade in California. So, I was literally a 12-year-old freshman.
Wow.
I graduated high school at 16. So I felt like my whole entire life was moved fast. Because my parents didn't really care too much. I ain't gonna say care too much on that level. I'm just saying, well, we had different, the way we were raised. So I was literally driving cars at 8th, 9th grade without licenses.
And why
my parents didn't say anything. I was working at nightclubs all through high school. And got up the next day, Wednesdays, Thursdays, of course the weekends. I was DJing parties. That's how I made my money while all the rest of my friends sold dope. In the 80s.
And where specifically were you growing up?
Out here?
All
right, the first time I came, my pops put me, he lived in, believe it or not, let me rewind something.
Okay.
First time I came to California, I want to say it was probably 1979. I'm talking about little kid. Right. 1979, 80, 81, I think. My father literally kidnapped me. Like I was walking to school in Chicago. He pulled up in an old Cadillac, said, "I'm your dad. Get in the car." Literally. You know, and wow. I kind of didn't recognize him. I recognized he had my uncle in the car, and I recognized him. So I said, "Oh, he got to be my dad." You know,
right?
And he drove all the way to California. So that, at this time, Pops was doing pretty good. You know, and he lived in Irvine. So that was the first time I ever seen, in the early 80s,
yeah, he was balling.
So it was like, that was culture shock. So I was at an all-white school. Me and my stepbrother were the only two blacks in the whole entire school. That was the first time I ever been called a nigger. That was the first time I ever went into any racial thing ever. And I didn't last too long. Matter of fact, there was only one kid that played with us, and he was the Jewish kid, and they didn't play with him either. And that was my first experience in California. After that, I went back to my mom because my mom had my pops locked up for kidnapping.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he literally kidnapped me, if that's you want to look at it, you know. And I went back. Then it was just a custody battle for years and years and years. So when I finally got out here, Pops had lived in Ontario, right by Pomona, California. Okay. And I could say it might have been a little bit better than maybe growing up literally in Los Angeles, but being close to Pomona ain't no joke either.
I was going to say, there's a lot of tracks out there.
Yeah, a lot of people say what they want to say, but the P-Town is...
It's no joke.
And I'm living right close to it, you know, so I got to see the same element. And but the housing, I want to say, was a little different, you know, than actually living in L.A.
Right.
You know, so it was okay. It was like kind of culture shock, but I dealt with it. I was a real bad kid. Fought everybody. I fought against gang members when I moved out here. I was like an anti-gang member out here.
And how did that work?
Kind of weird because it was like I got into it with everybody, just because I was coming from an area where that was like my stepbrother had lived with my father longer than I had. So when he brought me around, I would beat up his friends, literally. You know, like they're not tough enough to hang with us.
Okay.
And then most of my friends that from that time to now used to tell me like they used to like, man, you used to be like really rough. Like they could tell that I was an inner city kid. Just the way I carried myself and the things that I did. Like it was, you know, I fought whatever you would consider the tough guys. Or the bullies, or the local gangs. I was fighting all of them. Whether it was Trey 5-7s, the Black Angels, OVS. A lot of those dudes grew up to be Mexican mafia leaders.
Wow.
But you know, I got into it with them. Just everywhere I go. If you cuz me or blood me, because I didn't know what a Crip or a Blood was at the time. But I knew that you were trying to bang on me, and that's all they needed. So I grew up like that until I got around. I started. Let me just say it like this. I started befriending them. You know what I'm saying? I started saying we had the same views, but I never joined a gang in California. That was like a no-no.
Well, why was that a no-no for you?
Because I'm from a different area. Okay. And I'm not saying like I gang banged in Chicago, but I would have been gang banging in Chicago. I would have been dead or locked up, or, you know, just the neighborhood that I grew up. It was just like most of my cousins would like lightweight threaten me. Don't let us catch you out there gangbanging. We gonna come out there and you know what I'm saying? So it was like disrespectful to come from Chicago and then come to California and join something that was that's how I felt at the time. So it took years of, you know, I just befriended them after a while. Like the people that were considered the people you didn't want to hang with is who I hung with after a while.
Okay. And then what was it about when you said you had the same views as a lot of the gang members, like what did you mean specifically by that?
I mean, I was a knucklehead. So it was about who was tough. Like, in other words, we would go to parties, and I remember this back in the days. One dude could be from Compton, and he can come to a party and say, "This is Compton," and everybody would literally run. They would run just because he said he was from Compton or this is Compton. And you know what I mean? And that would actually instill fear in certain people. And I used to be the kind of dude to be like, well, you about 35, 45 minutes away from Compton.
This ain't close to Compton.
You know, and I would get into it. It was just like, I don't know, I just felt like I was a little taller than most of my friends, and I felt like just being a certain height used to get attention. You know, where the tough dudes always wanted to fight that dude. It's like I was always pointed out to fight. That's how I felt about it. And I used to beat bullies up. Like every school that my pops put me into, I got kicked out of. Every single one. You know, he tried to put me into what they considered good schools, or you know, didn't have the gang banging, you know, environment and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Which in that area was pretty much the white schools, and I would end up beating somebody up, getting kicked out. I didn't last more than 2 or 3 weeks until they sent me to what they considered the bad school.
Wow. So then, in the midst of all of this, how did you develop your love for music?
I'm going to say I've always loved music. I'm going to say I've been loving music since my previous life and this life. I'm going to say it like that, and I know I've been here thousands of times before. That's just how I feel about it. I was a baby that couldn't sleep without hearing like Beethoven and Mozart as a child. Like the old Disney records that had nothing but classical music, that was the only way I could go to sleep, period. You know, listening to Nutcracker all night is what put me to sleep. So it's kind of weird. Plus my parents, my father was a musician. He played bass. My uncle, Timothy Brown, he was a part with By the Side of Darkness on writing Love Jones, the original song. And I kind of came up in a musical family where the piano was always there, and I actually wanted to play it. So I kind of like self-taught myself how to play piano, and then my uncle taught me how to play just a little bit better, like more formally. And then I just had like a knack for it. I just felt like music was something that I always knew how to do.
So is that why you gravitated more to DJing and producing side of things than trying to be in the front line as an artist?
Well, yeah. At those years in my life, I was outgoing, but I wasn't really outgoing. Like, I feel an artist is outgoing. An artist has to be outgoing.
Right.
You know, you can't get on that stage and
be shy.
And you know, if you get booed, you know what I mean, keep performing. I was the type, if you booed me, I might jump down in the crowd and fight you.
Okay.
You know, so that's paying too much attention to.
I'll have to tell you this later because it's not about you, but I did see one incident of that one time, or two of that. One with Freddie Fox, one with the Wu-Tang. Both are crazy stories. But anyway.
Oh, well, one with Jayo. Remember the release party?
Yeah, that's true too, I guess. I remember Jayo at the Key Club.
Yep.
Because DJ Silk produced a lot of What You Gonna Do, Jayo's second album on Def Jam. And yeah, the release party around those eras they were wild times on stage.
Yep.
But yes, so as you're developing these things, do you think that the Pomona, being close to Pomona, is where you get that slap from that's on a lot of the records, a lot of the beats?
I'm going to say no. That comes from my parents, comes from my father.
Okay.
What I'm saying by that is my father was a real jazz collector, records and everything else. You know, of course, Parliament was in the house. Of course, Roger and Zapp was in the house.
Right.
You know, along with a whole lot of jazz records. You know, the Lonnie Listens, the Bob Jameses, you know, I had all the samples were in the house. So
that makes it easy.
One summer, I went back to Chicago, and my cousin was a DJ in Chicago. He DJ'd house music at that time, though. And I used to watch him, and I think that's where it actually, what made me want to maybe start producing, because I wanted to learn how to DJ. I thought that was cool. They was in the basement, you know, just spinning records and blending them, and I learned what a mixer was. You had to have 2 turntables. And when I left, he was older than me. When I left, he gave me my first Newmark. And that was the one where it was like a 2-channel, and it didn't have a crossfader. It had a knob.
I remember
where
that.
you turn, right.
I remember seeing those.
You know, so I brought that back to California with me, and then I had to get 2 turntables to go with it.
Okay.
Right? So At the time, I think my pops worked for Radio Shack, so he brought me that. Like all my toys were weird too. That's another thing.
So wait, your dad was working at Radio Shack. Was he doing that in Irvine as well, or is this a different period?
I think so. I think in Irvine, he worked for a company called Barron, who used to make pens. They made pens and stuff, paper like pens and.
Okay.
And then he started work. I think he had a part-time job, and that was the Radio Shack gig. Because all our toys came from Radio Shack. Like, I had, and this is funny if anybody gonna hear this and look it up. I used to have what they call 101 in 1 kits. That's what they're called. They're called 101 in 1 electronic kits. They had different numbers: 160 in 1 in 1, 50 in 1. Electronic kits. Now, these were things that engineers actually learned how to do when you got older. These are different kind of toys. They're not like when most kids had Legos. I had erector sets. I didn't have the same toys that everybody else had. So in an electronic 1-in-1 kit, it would come with wires, and you had capacitors, transistors, diodes, stuff like that, and you would have to learn how to
configure it all?
Configure these wires with wires to make things.
Well, it served you well, which we'll be getting to later in the interview, for a lot of the stuff that you're working on now and have been the last several years. So, gotta salute your father for that, I guess.
Yeah.
And Radio Shack. Shout out to Radio Shack.
Yeah, shout out to Radio Shack. Yeah, for real.
But as you started getting into DJing, and then what made you then want to try to produce?
Getting mad at a club, I think.
Break it down. What happened?
I had, let's say, 7th, 8th grade. My first drum machine was a 707.
Okay.
I couldn't get the 808. I had a 707, and turntables. I had one Pioneer turntable and one 1200. Couldn't afford 2 12s at the same time. You know, I had to do parties to get another 12. So I started DJing this club called Backwaters in Rancho. This is, what year is this now? This is out of high school, because I DJed all through high school. And I had a group at the time. They were called XL Family, which is, if you know the artist Casey Veggies, his father was our manager.
Wow, okay.
Okay, and that's through like pretty much family. They're all related. His cousins were my first group, you know. And even Casey used to be a baby watching us rehearse, you know what I'm saying, when he was young, you know. So I started working at the club, and I started noticing the promoters making way more money than the DJs. You know, we would go out and promote and do all the promotions, had our little flyers with our names on it, you know what I mean? I was promoting from, we would get up on Saturdays, Sundays, go to Venice Beach, then hit the Shaw, then go all the way back. So we used to have LA people coming all the way out, and I'm pretty sure anybody my age that remember Backwaters, they used to come in and drive all the way to Rancho Cucamonga.
I was going to say, you got to explain to people, that's like 50 miles.
Yeah, but people used to, some people, at them times there wasn't that many clubs in LA where, you know, it wasn't that much violence, you get what I mean?
It wasn't crazy.
So, you know, people from LA, like, hey, we can get out of the way and really enjoy ourselves, have some fun, some new girls out there we don't know nothing about. They would come down there on that level.
Right.
And, you know, and make the party crack. But one day I just decided, like, you guys, the promoters, was, you know, I was getting paid, I want to say $250 or $300 or something a night. And the promoters was making like thousands, you know what I'm saying? So I said, you know what, the next time you see me, y'all going to be playing my stuff in here. And that's exactly what happened, like literally. I decided not to DJ clubs anymore, go home, work on a lot of music, and get it out there, and just get it there, you know?
So the first stuff of yours that I knew was yours was on the What You Gonna Do album with Jayo Felony, including the title track. So how did you end up, through starting to produce, end up getting to be with Jayo Felony?
Well, let's go before that, because my first release on a major record is Lil Habdad's first album.
Mm-hmm. Long Beach.
You know, HD. Shout out to Lil Habdad in Long Beach. But, you know, he holds the
title for that?
Yeah, he holds the title. You know, he always talked smack to me about it, too.
And that's a underappreciated album on Priority Records.
Yeah, it's called The Dead Has Arisen. That was The Dead Has Arisen, I think.
That was the one on the cover. Was like half as cold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I produced the majority with a guy named Clever Kism. That was my partner at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But that's me playing most of the keys on that. I didn't get. That's a whole different story. I didn't get credit until I took off a gig. I took off a work day off of because I had a job at that time to actually even go down there and hear the records, and they didn't know I even had a part in that.
Well, that's probably why I didn't know that much.
But my name is on credit
on
the last.
Now,
on Dedicated is what I got credit for, even though I played more stuff.
It's funny because now that you say that, I've noticed throughout your discography, you tend to have the beginning and the ends of a lot of albums, which is kind of strange.
Oh, yeah.
Or you appear on those. You have stuff in the middle, too, of course, but...
I tried to focus on the middle stuff after a while. Like, What You Gonna Do when that came around, I would think that's when I started maybe... I didn't think about a single on that. And I got with Jayo through friends. You know what I'm saying? And we had a label called Street Institute Records.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Hat Dog, rest in peace, and homie Al Dog. That was that put up. Both of them put the money up for that. You know, and they believed in us at that time. And we had like a independent company, and one of the homies from Gardena met my homie, and they put us together, actually. So it was Cam, Peace Treaty Cam,
right?
Guy by the name of Money Green, and Jayo. And there's a song called, it's hard, I hate when you can't remember your own records.
Yeah.
It's called Name in Your Mouth All Day. That was the first record I ever did with Jayo. But before I met him, I knew who he was. You get what I mean? Like the very first Jayo album. I said if I ever got to do a record with him, I knew it would be good before I even met him.
Yeah, I mean, through the show soundtrack and then obviously Take a Ride, Jayo was putting it in and had a lot of very memorable material. So for you, what was it about him that made you kind of single him out as somebody like, man, if I work with this dude?
I'm going to tell the truth. I don't care even if the homies get mad. But I'm going to tell the truth. Remember Music Plus back in the days, right? Mm-hmm. So we had a record store, and I only had a certain amount of money. I was like, I'm going to buy one tape right now. So I went and bought, and I'm going to say it, I bought Jayo's first album, right? It was Take a Ride, right? Yep. And I bought Caution.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Ice Cube's group on Lynch Mob Records.
Yep. And I said, all right, I went to the car. I said, one of these going back.
Oh, wow.
For real. And it wasn't like I didn't like Caution. I just liked Jayo way. By the time I got to Shermstick, I was like,
You're like, you were there.
Yeah, I was like, okay, I'm sorry. Homies have to take yours back. And I took it because I had that much money, you know what I mean? So I went on and took that back, and I kept Jayo, and I banged it. And it was just something about his voice. Like, I thought he was always bigger. I know you had to think that. You thought he was bigger.
He sounded
he sounded huge. He sounded like he was 7 feet tall or something.
Yeah. But he's not.
Yeah, and this is way before I think we actually got together, though.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Let's see, what time Take a Ride came out when?
So that's looking at like 96, 7 in that era.
Is it? Take a Ride came out before that, didn't it?
Or 95. It was 95 because I'm thinking of the videos.
94 is when I did Have Dad's album.
Right.
I wasn't out there like that.
Because the show with Shermstick and all that, or the Zoom Zooms and all that, that's like 95.
Yep.
Take a Ride's 96, and then, there you go.
Yep.
So that's crazy, because the thing that I always thought was interesting about Jayo was Shermstick and the show, and a lot of Take a Ride is he was one of the early ones, other than weed, to really talk about these other drugs and doing them and like embracing it, endorsing it, that type of thing. And that kind of was like, that was startling to me. Like, whoa, this dude is talking about the wet, and like, whoa, what is he? What?
Yeah. And I didn't know nothing about it. I just liked the director.
Yeah. Well, that just let me know that he was willing to take different chances creatively, artistically, and then the Lokes on His Own, I think, is one of my favorite songs of his, just because since not all gangster rap, but a lot of gangster rap can be viewed as celebratory, I think Jayo, like the great artists, like the Ice-T's and the Schoolie D's and the Ice Cubes and the Scarfaces, DJ Quiks and so on, the ones that are great show the reflective side and like the downfalls of it and the problems that come along with living that life. And that's what Lokes on His Own really stood out to me for that purpose, because it showed that thing. And then one of the records you did on What You Gonna Do, the Easy to Get In, that was a record too that I thought was a very creative way to look at being incarcerated from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So for you, what do you remember about making that song with him and like how that came about?
Really, I was in the house. We all stayed in the same house. Money Green had a house in Ontario. I went to get a peace of mind and go over there and start creating. And Jayo was in the next room. And while I was making beats, Jayo used to just come around and be like, hey, you mind if I write to that? Like, go ahead. And, you mind if I write to that? Go ahead. And that's how he did it. Like, he really, like, we didn't do a lot of mingling together. He actually, Jayo reads a lot of books. He was a big reader. You know what I mean? He was sitting there and just go through pages and pages of big novels and stuff. You know what I'm saying? I don't read books. I read, like, schematics. I read instruction manuals and stuff like that. So he went around and he would just ask me if I could get this or grab that, and he would write to him. That's kind of how it started. You know what I mean? So I didn't know what he actually had planned. I just would just let him write to whatever songs he wanted. Then we got in the studio and he started laying them. Then it was like, oh, okay. Totally different story now.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then I started kicking in trying to be like creative. Like, from the beginning, that's cocaine in the beginning of
on
it.
The intro.
Acting like he's a white dude or a cop, right?
Right.
And then you hear the helicopter, and then you hear I start thinking like that on that level, trying to make a movie scene to go in to the first record. We was doing that stuff then.
Well, on What You Gonna Do, one of the other things, to your point, and it's interesting you brought that up on your own, because one of the things that I always remember about that album, you did the intro to outro, but then some of the other songs, they're labeled as skits, but they're actual songs with verses, and they're 2 or 2.5 minutes long. It's not like a skit, like a comedy thing, or it's very cinematic, but then it's really a verse or a real song. So creatively, how does that work from your perspective of how the genesis of that is different from making a song versus doing these intro outro skits, even though they end up being kind of like mini songs?
I want to say I maybe got that idea from Dre and Quik.
Okay.
You get what I mean? Hearing skits that sounded very well, and then hearing Quik's grooves,
right,
interludes.
Yep.
And then kind of combining the two. Because remember, Jay used to perform the outro. He used to perform that like as like an opener before we do shows.
Right.
And I just thought that the songs should make sense going into each other like that. And what Kennedy is, I don't know, like how many records was really like that in that time? Was it a lot of records like that in that time? Because I don't remember.
More in the late 80s, early 90s, I think it got away from that, and we had a few concept albums, but that was one of the things that What You Gonna Do stood out to me, because it wove into each other, kind of like a Ruthless Records record would have back in the day, one of the Dre or Death Row projects, where it was very or Ice Cube, it was very seamless.
Yeah, and shout out to Jinx. Can't say me, because it was really listening to those kind of records. Public Enemy also. To hear those like little skits kind of and then go into a record. I think those ideas came from them. For me.
Because the level of the cinematic nature of the records you're referring to, and then also with Jayo's, you know, you got people getting chased and like pulling up on streets and all kinds of stuff. It's not just here's a song, on to the next song. Here's a song, oh, let me talk to this girl over the phone. Like, it's no, it's much more cinematic. And I think, you know, we got to your point, a lot of great stuff of that from on the production side. Dr. Dre, Prince Paul, of course, did a lot of that stuff with De.O.C in particular. And then DJ Quik had this stuff going on with the Quik's Groove, but then also some of his production savvy on his records and the ones that he produced for other people as well. And then Sir Jinx, of course, with Ice Cube, and with Cool G Rap and different things that Sir Jinx did. So it's a lot of very, very cinematic stuff that's been done in rap. And the reason why I wanted to ask you is because by the time What You Gonna Do was coming out in '98, that had kind of not gone by the wayside totally, but it wasn't as prominent as it had been, 10 years, 8 years earlier.
In the beginning, hip-hop was ruled by the East Coast. Then the West Coast rose to prominence, thanks to gangster rap. Hip-hop changed the world. Gangster rap changed the narrative.
I'm representing for the gangsters all across the world.
And then changed the world again.
'Cause I'll come and take your life away.
The history of gangster rap features unheard stories, unseen photos and documents, all with exclusive interviews from the founders and players who shaped gangster rap.
I think a real gangster rapper has to scare you a little bit.
The history of gangster rap written by veteran rap journalist Soren Baker. In stores now.
Yo, what up? This is DJ Quik. Be sure to pick up my homeboy Soren Baker's book, The History of Gangster Rap, if you really want to know what we do.